Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio, and I'm excited because this morning we're going to be talking to our good friend, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. That's coming up in just a little bit. I do have a couple of announcements when it comes to community activities for the weekend and in the near future. And I want to welcome anybody that's tuning in that is in town for the Wine Glass Marathon. There is a special that we've put together here on Big Fox that I think will be very helpful to you as a runner, but also if you are a resident and you're curious about maybe the traffic patterns, if you are, well, basically a fan, anybody that's in our area right now should not miss this very special broadcast. I'm going to put it up on the screen right now. The Guthrie Wine Glass Marathon Preview Special, brought to you by our friends at Hector Hideaway. It's going to broadcast on Saturday at 9:30 in the morning, and then again at 10 p.m. at night. So you're resting up, you're in bed, you're getting ready for the big run the next morning. Well, tune in. And then Sunday, if you're getting around, you're getting up, you're stretching, we're going to broadcast it at 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. only on Big Fox. I'm very proud to have hosted that broadcast. We interview Sheriff Jim Allard. We also interview Sheila Sutton. She is the race director. So you get a lot of information and a lot of great footage from past wine glass marathons. So I highly recommend that you tune in. Okay, we're going to talk just a second. We're basically going to spend a lot of time with Phil this morning. But I wanted to talk about the impeachment inquiry here for just a moment. I know the media is presenting it as a loss for Republicans, that some of the witnesses suggested there isn't an avenue for impeachment. And the big point here is yet. That's something that's being overlooked. As a matter of fact, Jonathan Turley, excuse me, who was one of the witnesses, has a really great piece at the New York Post that highlights the 10 reasons why it's worth investigating Joe Biden. Are we going to have time to get to all of them? No. That's just the nature of the schedule here, but let me put it up on the screen for you. He said it is important to emphasize, and remember, the media is using his words being a witness saying, see, there's no impeachment. But you got to remember, this is an inquiry. He says it's important to emphasize what this hearing is not. It is not a hearing on articles of impeachment. I have previously stated that, which I believe that an impeachment inquiry is warranted. I do not believe that the evidence currently meets the standards of a high crime and misdemeanor needed for an article of impeachment. But that's why they're having the inquiry. So he has 10 reasons why it is worth investigating Joe Biden. Hunter Biden and his associates were running a classic influence peddling operation using Joe Biden and his name, of course. And then again, I can't go through all 10 of these, but I would highly recommend that you look at this yourself at the New York Post so you are prepared. As people say, see, there was nothing in that first hearing. He says after the 10, these are only some of the reasons corruption allegations facing the president, but each could raise impeachment conduct if a nexus is established to the president. So that's something that I would highly recommend that you read for yourself this morning, because we're doing some national news here at the beginning, because we will be talking state issues with the Assemblyman here in just a little bit. We got our first wave. I feel a sneeze coming on. I don't like that. Okay. Let's go to what our Congressman, Nick Langworthy, had to say before we go to break. He released a statement on the impeachment, the House Oversight Committee's initial hearing on the Biden impeachment inquiry. He says it's clear that President Biden repeatedly lied to the American people regarding his involvement in his family's business dealings and foreign influence peddling schemes. Today's hearing laid out the overwhelming amount of evidence that warrants further investigation to determine if President Joe Biden abused his public office for his family's financial gain. We heard directly from legal and financial experts who confirmed our impeachment inquiry is on the right track. Congress has a constitutional duty to conduct oversight over the executive branch, and we will continue to demand answers on behalf of the American people. So that's our Congressman Nick Langworthy, and I wanted to bring that to you to start off the program. Again, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano joining us in just a little bit. Let's take that first break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. I got lost looking at my paperwork. I didn't realize we were back on. Welcome to Frankly Speaking. Thank you for joining us. This is, Frankly Speaking, I'm your host, Frank Acom. I'm reading this article and I'm getting all engrossed, and everybody's walking by because it's Wine Glass Marathon weekend. So thank you for joining us. I see the Assemblyman is, it looks like he's pulling up here in just a second. So here is the contact information. If you have any questions for the Assemblyman, get them to me. I'll be checking during the broadcast to make sure. We already received one that I plan on addressing or bringing up to the Assemblyman. So that's coming up in just a little bit. There was one other thing. Yesterday, Biden did indeed start his campaign of it's a threat to democracy under Trump. And also, I think this is laughable, not laughable, typical of Republicans. Did you see that these kind of anti-Trump mega donors are getting very worried? Because as Newt Gingrich said, whether you like it or not, Trump will be the nominee, and that the GOP should cancel future debates because he's just that far ahead. Well, that's terrifying some mega donors who just do not like Trump. So now they're talking about Glenn Youngkin entering the GOP presidential race. I mean, I don't know. It's just like when Romney came out and gave that big speech essentially telling you to vote for Hillary Clinton. It's all these people think they're the smartest in the room, and very often, most times that backfires. But we got to take a break because our Assemblyman's in the building. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. And this is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program because we're being joined this morning by Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Frank. Good to be with you again.
How was the summer?
It's too quick.
Yeah, right.
As usual.
Look at the leaves changing. It's unbelievable. It's Wine Glass Marathon weekend already.
Yeah, it's an exciting time here.
It's kind of the kickoff of fall, but we have a lot to talk about. And I think the first one that's on everybody's minds, and boy, if you read the New York Post and elsewhere, the migrant crisis. Give us a little idea of where your mind is right now on the migrant crisis, because there's about 10 different layers. It's like an onion that we can keep peeling, and it's worse and worse.
It is worse and worse, and the more you hear about it, the worse it gets. I mean, let's be honest with the listeners and everyone.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is this is a failure of the Biden administration and the federal government to secure the border, period. Just to give some staggering statistics, in the 33 months of the Biden administration, there have been nearly 6 million illegal immigrant encounters at the border, and that's the ones that they know of, that they've documented. In the 33 months prior to his administration, there were 1.8 million encounters. So a tripling of the number of illegal immigrants crossing the border, and now they're using this measure of asylum to try to seek residence here, and with no accountability. And it's been a very problematic. And then what you saw is now New York City, a self-proclaimed sanctuary city, always said we're always welcome, and then when people started showing up there, over 100,000, like, we can't accept them. And then
they're literally saying, don't come here anymore.
They're saying, don't come here. Just come to a more, it's not affordable for you. So they're acknowledging that New York State and New York City is not affordable. So that's what their issue is, to try to deter people from coming here. But that's very, very problematic, Frank. I mean, we've seen this over and over again. And really, Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams, not once have they ever said, President Biden, secure the border. Not once has Senator Schumer or Senator Gillibrand said secure the border. All they've been saying is we need more money from the federal government to deal with this. We need to fast track work permits so they can be here, which I think also in that issue, it does send a different message, almost like normalizing the behavior too. So I think
encouraging
that's
it in some ways.
Encouraging the behavior. And I think so what we're seeing is in our conference, and the Senate Republican Conference has called for a special session to deal with this situation. Obviously the federal government's not going to deal with it. And some of the things we've called for is, number one, we should register and do background checks on all these migrants that are coming into
At the very
state.
least.
At the very least, just to track them. Because the thing about when they seek asylum, if they get an asylum date, it's not like for next week or next month. It's like for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So we'll lose track of them. So we should be able to track them.
And no one's showing up.
No one's showing up at these things.
And
Absolutely.
think about the court system. They're so backlogged anyway.
Absolutely.
That's why you're getting 3-4 years out.
Right. And then on top of it, we are asking for like a full accountability of every dollar that's spent, where it's spent, every municipality, and how it's working. We're also calling for local control over the decision making on whether to accept migrants from other facilities,
Right.
other communities. Like New York City has threatened to send them upstate. They have sent some upstate, which is why you've seen all these local governments, county governments, pass resolutions declaring emergencies, saying that they can't house migrants here and can't send them here. And I think the other areas, like, don't house them in daycares and schools.
Right.
And we've seen issues down in Long Island where they had them in a school and things of that nature.
And did you see the piece by the New York Post where the opening day of school in New York City, they had to move kids to another building because they just weren't prepared? And how were they not prepared?
Right. It's just not safe. And that's the thing, I think, the underlying circumstances of this whole border crisis that we're facing is the number one job of a government is to keep her citizens safe. And obviously the federal government is failing that. The state government is failing that issue. If you get into our criminal justice policies, the bail reform policies in the state. But in this issue, it's obviously a failure of securing the border. And we've seen some of these immigrants who are committing crime. Up in Western New York, rape. We've seen other assaults. We've seen repeat offenders get arrested for multiple times and getting released because of the bail reform law. So it's kind of a perfect storm of criminality and concern that I understand people are having. And the other thing on this issue is we should, in 2017, Governor Cuomo declared an executive order, basically
He thought he was president.
Yeah,
at that
he
point.
did. He certainly thought he was president. He wanted to be president, but that's not going to happen. Hopefully not. And he declared an emergency executive order saying that local law enforcement could not cooperate with federal ICE officials dealing with illegal immigration. Basically, what that essentially did is made New York State a sanctuary state without declaring it, because he's saying you're not cooperating. So you have that issue. Governor Hochul could reverse that. The legislature could reverse that, but they haven't done that. And the other thing, one of our proposals is saying, let's have a special session and we can't compel the federal government. We can pass a resolution, say, secure the border and provide the resources to the state because of your failed border policies. And the other thing on this issue too, Frank, you've seen, I saw an article recently in the New York Post about a 95-year-old Korean War veteran who was housed in a facility and was basically displaced because they were converted to a shelter for migrants. I mean, that is wrong. That is unacceptable. That says a seriously wrong message, and it's very problematic that this is happening.
And remember, they told us that wasn't going to happen, and that was all hype. I mean, there's Frank Tamaro, 95-year-old Korean War veteran. Yeah. He loved it there, got kicked out because of the migrant shelter.
And that's the thing with this, Frank. I mean, that's the thing with these hotels. A lot of them, we have homeless issues here in Corning, in upstate New York. It's Steuben County, Chemung County. And some of these hotels, they house homeless, they house disabled, domestic violence, and some veterans. And so none of these individuals our citizens should be displaced to house illegal migrants who are coming here. And then basically because these places can get a bigger paycheck from the city of New York or from the federal government to house them. That's just wrong. And to double down on this policy is a concern I have, Senator O'Mara, Chris Friend, and our people in the region that we just signed recently. The mayor of New York just changed through executive order their voucher housing program for the homeless to say usually you had to be within the 5 boroughs of New York City to qualify for this voucher. Now he's saying they can live outside the city and they'll pay the vouchers. So that would be like they'd pay their rent and help with their rent for up to a year. But after a year, you're on your own. So then the social service agencies here in these upstate communities, the criminal justice systems, the law enforcement would all be strained by these issues. And that's the problem with this issue. In the New York State Association of Counties have come out and said, don't do this. We can't allow this to happen. No. Our social services systems are strained in upstate New York. We can't take another influx of migrants and people coming to our upstate communities or other homeless from other communities. We have our own situation to deal with. We don't have the resources to take care of the people that we have to take care of now. This would just strain it both on the social services side, on the law enforcement side, and in the quality of life side. And this is very problematic, and this is something that has raised a red flag across the board.
And law enforcement already strapped, can't find people,
Absolutely.
And we've talked about it all the time. So you think about the law enforcement, but also if New York City with all their resources can't handle it. How can a Corning, an Addison, a Big Flats, how can they handle it?
We can't.
No,
and
it's
it'd
simple
be
as
put
that.
on right on the backs of the property taxpayers. In New York City, they have an income tax, and obviously they continue to raise income taxes because they believe that's in the best interest. But in the state budget, we provided $1 billion in aid to the city of New York to deal with this issue.
Right.
And then they're a sanctuary city, but that's not enough. Then they asked for more. They contracted with a no-bid contract to this agency, and all this agency was trying to do was to ship them in upstate communities.
Yeah.
And now the mayor is saying we need $12 billion more. Where's that money going to
Where's
come
that coming
from?
from?
I mean, we're already facing, if they look to the state, for the listeners, going into this budget year, we're facing a $9 billion budget deficit this coming year, and a $36 billion budget deficit over the next 3 years. Where's that money going to come from? I mean, there's talk about a migrant tax to tax citizens to help pay for this migrant crisis. I mean, and we know what the Dems will always go, it's always about taxing the rich, and the wealthy already pay their more share, and they can leave. They have the ability to leave. And just to show you just from a fiscal perspective, so you know they are. In 2020 in New York City, there were 3.57 million New Yorkers with an average income of $140,000 who left the state of New York.
Yeah.
They were replaced by 3.5 million New Yorkers with an average income of $80,000. So that was a net loss of 70,000 individuals, but a net loss of $34 billion in taxable income just out the door. And their answer is to increase taxes, and then that's just going to lead to more and more New Yorkers, businesses, families, farmers, manufacturers leaving our state, and we can't afford that.
We had a piece the other day that young, wealthy millennials, so just specifically on millennials, New York they're leaving New York in droves. It cost us, just with millennials, that one age group, $8 billion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at the numbers of the adjusted gross income to states like Florida compared to New York over the past 5-6 years, our adjusted gross income is going down while their adjusted gross income is going up. And they don't have a tax income tax in New York, in Florida, and some of these other states like Tennessee and Texas. And you wonder why people are leaving.
Right.
There's an affordability crisis. There's a quality of life crisis. There's a public safety crisis because of the policies that keep being in advance, unfortunately, by Governor Hochul and the socialist agenda that's coming out of Albany. And that's the thing that we need to be aware of and speak out on.
Right, and you got to think, if you're living in New York, you're already dealing with a high cost of living here. You've got the taxes. Now you have public safety issues on top of it. At what point does someone say that? Why is this worth it?
Right, and that's
just
the
having
thing.
New York
When you can leave and pay less taxes, when you can leave and have more freedom. Because I remember Governor Cuomo said people were leaving because of the weather. They weren't leaving because of the weather climate. They were leaving because of the business climate. They were leaving because of the tax climate. They were leaving because of the freedom climate. And when you see more and more infringements, whether it's on Second Amendments of law-abiding citizens being taken away, whether it's just energy choice on how you want to heat your home, cook your food, power your buildings, or the car you want to drive, more and more choices being taken away, all for this really extreme radical agenda that is not helping the affordability matter at all.
And there's actually, and I've got to take a break, but there's actually a piece in the New York Post today by Kristen Fleming saying why compassion is killing America's great cities, meaning compassion, this kind of virtue signaling, right? That we're doing everything. We want to be the most liberal state, and look what it's got us, right? So let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. We're being joined this morning by Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Phil, we received a question, I think it was late last night, but when I mentioned that you were going to be on the program. I want to put it up on the screen here. My utility costs have gone up. Since they took our ability to negotiate away from us, my costs have gone up from $35 to over $50 a month, and it's the summertime. We're not in the winter yet. We're going to get killed this winter. That needs to be addressed by the state. Thank you. So I think that's specifically for you. I think we could talk about energy for quite a while here.
Right.
And the policies.
I know we've talked about it, doing a show just on it. But,
I think we should.
For the listener, unfortunately, I think this is just the beginning of the problem that we're going to see relative to our energy bills. For example, this year's budget, they passed an all-new Electric Buildings Act, which basically said you couldn't power homes with natural gas or fossil fuels. To go to this move to go to full electrification, which is basically going to lead to higher utility costs, construction costs, housing costs, conversion costs to convert your home over from like a natural gas boiler or furnace to electrification with heat pumps, which some estimates say would cost $35,000 to convert. The problem is, and I know NYSEG just went through a rate hearing and negotiation with the state. Their proposal when they came out with it was much higher than it should have been, and it got whittled down. But it's still talking about $9 up to $9 a month increase over the next 3 years each year. And that's for the one portion of the bill, the transportation and delivery side. Your energy bill is comprised of two sections. There's the transportation and delivery side. That's the part that goes through rate increases by the utilities with the PSC that they have to approve and negotiate. The other part is